Aloha and welcome to part 2 of my STIG educational guides. My name is Matthew Combs, also known as the STIG man by some. I have about 15 years of experience with the DoD and the cybersecurity side of the house. I've been doing a broad range of things. I've pretty much started all the way at the ISSO and have moved up to a security control assessor representative type job was my last one. I have done CCRI preps and things of this nature. So I have kind of intimately been involved with STIGs since pretty much I was starting this whole journey. With that said, this video is going to be made more with the Air Force requirements in mind. So some of those references will be, Air Force instructions or AFIs, and they won't apply to Army, Navy, Marines. However, the basics should still apply. Any DoD level reference will still apply to you. Just don't worry about any of the Air Force ones. This video has been made while I'm unemployed as a professional courtesy. If you'd like to use any of these videos as training aids or as part of your curriculum for students, please send an email to the address I'm leaving in the description. At this time, I'm not charging anybody for using it, but I would like to keep track of who's using it. So if I need to make changes or updates, I can send an email out and say, hey, this needs to change or this was incorrect. If there is any additional information or questions you have, or you believe that I am incorrect at any of the explanations that I'm giving, please leave a comment or send me an email, and we can address it that way. And if I need to make changes, I will. So in this particular video, we're going to talk about some misconceptions and FAQs. I only have about 10 of them in here. Obviously, there's going to be more, but these are kind of the big ticket items that I normally ran into when I was dealing with systems. So the first one is domain joint systems have all STIGs applied by default. That is false. Typically, your configuration management tools will not handle all checks. They only do the operating system level stuff, and it is what we call the automated checks. And those automated checks are typically handled by doing an update to your registry or opening your security policy plugin for Windows and making changes within there. On top of that, even if the configuration management client that you use is capable of doing all STIG requirements, you will still need to provide a checklist for validation if you are going in for an RMF decision, right? So it's not that these can't help you because they do some items for you. It's just they will not do everything. You will still have to complete the rest. Like if you have a SQL server, you're still going to have to run the SQL one manually. Only the Windows OS would be completed or even looked at. Okay, so this is kind of one of those big ones that I've argued many times with. So Nessus scans came back clean. That means that your STIGs are done. Again, that's false. Your Nessus scans are basically going to be looking at the same things that your configuration management client can handle, which are registry keys or small security policy setting changes. Again, it's only doing an automated portion, which is about 70% of the full checklist. It is also only the OS level, at least the last time I interacted with it. And the scanner needs to be configured to do those SCAP scans. In my experiences, a lot of the personnel that are hired or assigned to handle the ACAS scans at a local level don't know how to do that or don't understand. So it's kind of a pain to use sometimes. Typically, it does take longer to request and receive the scans from the local support than it takes to actually use another tool that we will discuss later called the SEC tool. The results of these Nessus scans also still need to be moved to the CKL file for validation, and I'm not positive that if you get the results from the Nessus scans or ACAS scans, depending on who you ask, will actually be in a format that the STIG viewer can ingest. That doesn't mean it won't help you if you're an ISSM and you're experienced at reading the reports and manually inputting those into the checklist. I just don't recommend trying to use this as your way. No validator is going to accept ACAS scans as a results for your STIGs. This one is not as common, but it comes up every once in a while. When you install the Red Hat 6 or 5 or 7 now, I think, um, you have an option to configure it in accordance with the DoD STIGs, right? It asks you, it's a yes or no question. You can say yes, and it will do some of them, but it only does a small portion of the OS level. They are supposed to be the automated checks, and those again can be met with the SEC tool anyway. So, I mean, it's not, it helps, but it's not like you're going to be done with all of your checks, because it's only, even out of those automated checks, it's only about 45% to 50% of them, because it can't make a bunch of adjustments. The thing I put up here is the permissions items, right? So there's no way a baseline configuration is going to know who needs permissions, like what users, etc., to what folders outside of the very basic root level, and or you could ruin your OS level directories, right? So you're still going to have to go in and make changes. Once the SCAP scans are done, STIGs are done. That's incorrect. The SCAP scans are done by the SEC tool. You get that from the DISA website, but we'll go talk about those a lot later. And these are actually what is the automated checks. So about 70% of the individual rules in your full checklists are typically covered by the SCAP scans. You do have manual related requirements where there are going to be questions such as ask your ISSM if separation of duties is in place or something like that, right? Like those are items that you just have to manually answer. The SCAP scan results or SEC tool results need to be imported into the checklist files. And again, we'll talk about this a lot more later, but that is a simple process to do. CMRS. Now, I can't remember what the actual acronym stands for, but CMRS is the replacement for Vulnerability Management System. CMRS does not solve your STIG issues. It only has the data that is put into it. Now, typically it rolls back into what the Nessus scans, and I believe the host-based security system scans, which is McAfee or Symantec, whichever, depending on what operating system you use. And again, it's only the automated stuff that's going to be put in there automatically. Anyway, you'll have to go in and manually input the rest of the data. CMRS automation only applies to domain-connected systems because it is using those Nessus scans. If you have your own Nessus scanner / HBSS or EPO server, policy orchestrator server for your host-based security system, then you can still run the scans and provide the data, but it's not automatically fed into CMRS. You actually have to get an account through DISA to be able to upload data within there. And the last time I dealt with DISA for CMRS, it was not in a good place for most people to use outside of the domain. So that's one of those use at your own risk things. Another problem with it, if your assets and hosts are not tagged properly, the ones that are on the domain, then the little data that's supposed to be imported into CMRS through ACAS and your HBSS clients will be inaccurate or wholly incomplete, which causes more issues. You want to be able to have the right data in there. So I basically would not recommend using CMRS right now. If you are doing this for your first look, to get your RMF decision, your ATO, your authority to operate through a risk management framework, then trying to use CMRS is actually going to be more of a roadblock than it is going to be a help. Okay, so Fortify scans and application security. Yes, the newest versions of Fortify scans do scan the code, and they do assist with the application security and development STIG. But only that one, and only for the one application or two applications, whatever, that you scan with Fortify. However, you still need to provide the data and a checklist file. It also only does the automated portion of the STIGs. So any type of tool, if you've noticed, any type of tool that I've brought up that is supposed to automate and or make this easier, only does a portion of the STIGs. So you're still going to have to do some manual labor. The good thing is you still need those fortified results for RMF, especially if you are doing your own development of the program. So you still need to keep them. So it does help you. It's not the perfect solution. You're still going to have to do other items to make sure that you're covering all of your bases. This is the biggest one right here. Do STIGs need to be 100% compliant? The answer to that is no, but the effort needs to be made that you attempted to get it as close to 100% as possible. In my experience, if I see a STIG checklist come by with 100% compliance, no not applicables, no findings, no not reviewed, everything has been looked at and it's all compliant, I'm going to dig. And most people I know that are reviewing these are going to dig a lot more too. With time, you'll be able to kind of understand or see the patterns of what it is a STIG that has actually been done and one that has just kind of been thrown together last minute. So the reason that these don't have to be 100% compliant is because they can still be mitigated. So let's say you have to have a password length of 15 characters, the bat symbol, everything else, but you can't do that because the system doesn't allow passwords to be that long, or the application doesn't allow passwords to be that long, and it's hard coded in. You can only have 10 character passwords, right? Well, then you have other compensating controls and or ways to minimize the effect that will have on your cybersecurity posture. Maybe it's you have to use two-factor authentication or something like that, right? Like those are still mitigating factors. So if it's an open finding and you can't fix it, or you're not going to fix it, you're going to have to do a couple of things. And the big item is a plan of action and milestones, which is a POAM. And we'll talk more about how to populate a POAM way later as I get into RMF as a whole. But it's basically a documented timeline of what you're going to do, how long it's going to take, and how you're going to fix or mitigate the problem at hand, right? And typically to fill out a plan of actions and milestones and to have a STIG be risk accepted, you need to do what's called a cybersecurity impact assessment. So you need to understand, well, what is the risk or what is the problem if I don't fix this? What do I have that can mitigate it? What does this affect overall on my system if I try to make this change? You need to look at dollars amount, so you're doing qualitative and quantitative type risk analysis to be able to submit these to your security control assessor representative or your security control validator or whoever's doing your RMF, so that they know what the problem is, why you can't fix it, if you could, how much it's going to cost, so that you can plan this out as part of your POAM, your plan of action and milestones. After those are done, then we can look at doing the risk assessment. So if it was a category 1 hit, which is the highest level of hit that you can have, and you have mitigating factors, and it's not anything big, maybe the risk assessment is really low. Maybe we're going to say, oh, it is a low impact, low priority problem that probably isn't going to introduce any risk to the Air Force or the Army or the Navy or whatever. And those can be many, many things. Maybe you don't have any data that is controlled or important. Maybe it's just a normal machine that you used to do like VR on, because that's the big thing now, is everybody wants to do virtual reality or augmented reality. And then based upon your POAM, the cybersecurity impact assessment, and your risk assessment, you'll probably get looked into for risk acceptance, requesting through the authorizing official who will do your AO or your ATO decision. And this is all part of the process. So as long as you are following or doing most of your STIGs, and if you have hits, documenting them, showing how you're going to fix them, why you can't, showing the risk that it will have on your system and possibly to your DoD component as a whole, you shouldn't have a problem requesting risk acceptance through your authorizing official's office. Not through the AO. Please don't reach out to your AO directly. But that will get you to where you need to be. Don't ever think that you have to have 100% compliance on everything. There are ways around it. You just have to put in the effort. I have seen people try to do risk acceptance for just not doing STIGs at all, and that didn't work in their favor. RSOP and STIG compliance. RSOP is resultant set of policy. It can provide some configuration evidence, which is the items that would be handled by your SCCM client or your configuration management client, whichever you use. Each one of them has a different name, but they're not accepted as a form of proof for STIG compliance. Providing an RSOP like the policy is, you can read it and it would make sense, but you still need to provide the checklist files. Everything that you're going to find in your RSOP is going to be handled by using the SCC tool, or what would be handled by using SCCM or another configuration management client anyway. So just skip trying to use RSOP. Don't try to argue that it's the way to handle it or the easy way to do it, because it is not. It's more trouble than it's worth, I promise you. All right, so there's some discussion we'll have on the next video on who's actually supposed to do these STIGs, but this is the big one. I've had arguments with ISSOs or the system engineers where they're saying that the ISSM should be doing it because it is documentation related to the system and its vulnerabilities. And that's not the case, right? An ISSM or Information System Security Manager should not have rights to do any kind of administrative tasks on your system. Their job is to do security/audit type requirements. If you have an ISSM that has admin level capabilities and the ability to do the audits and remove audit logs, they can really do whatever they would like with your system. Now, I understand that some systems are smaller and it can be done where ISSMs do everything. It has happened in the past, and I'm not saying that you will not get punished for it, but I haven't seen it. That doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. Just remember that the ISSM should only be reviewing the data with the engineers or ISSOs or system admins and asking the questions about why we couldn't fix it or why it's in A, etc. That way they have a better idea of how to present this to the validators, the security control assessor, whoever, during the risk assessment. It'll help you guys with RMF. Okay, so there's been talks about baselines and people only doing STIGs on one machine. You can do that if you have a documented baseline or baselines plural. Now those documented baselines need to be pretty thorough, right? So if you have a user workstation and every single user workstation is going to have the Windows 10 OS, Microsoft Office 2016 and Adobe and nothing else, then yes, you can use or run STIGs on one machine and use that and say, look, this is what all of my machines are going to be configured as. Now, typically the way that I've seen this work out is for bigger systems. If you have 5 or 6 workstations, the chances of you being able to just run it on one, provide that checklist and say it applies across the board is not as high as somebody who has, 150 workstations that are configured that way, right? With that in mind, all of these need to be the same across the board. All the programs installed need to be the same. They need to be managed by the same policies. They need to be within the same boundary, accreditation boundary, etc. If there is differences between how they are managed and what programs are on them, then it's really, really difficult to argue that that is considered a baseline because there's differences. And as a disclaimer, you will always need to check with your authorizing official staff, whoever it is that you're working with for your RMF accreditation, because they will tell you whether you're allowed to use a baseline, if you are allowed to use it, how you need to provide that data for them. And this is a link to the DISA FAQ page with some more stuff that you can use you may be able to find the answers to your questions there as well. That's it for today, and I appreciate you guys sticking around. If you have, the link for this particular PowerPoint will be in the description as well. Please like and subscribe. My next video will be coming out again sometime the first week of February. Have a nice day.